Hey everyone, welcome. Thanks so much for joining the American Red Cross for a live detailing of what you can expect when attending your CPR AED class. My name is Dwayne Lindo. I'm the Regional Communications Manager here in the Central Florida region, specifically in Orlando. Now, I've been here, or I've been a part of this organization for 5 years now, and in that 5 years, we've pretty much have folks within this region receive life-saving awards. Who people who have stepped up as heroes, who knew this life-saving skill of CPR and been able to go in and literally save lives. So I'm pretty focused and pretty sure of how important this life-saving skill is in the 5 years that I've been part of the Red Cross. Now, remember, make sure that you put your questions in the chat box, and my lovely Red Cross volunteer, Kathy Burkett, will read them out at the end. Today's a special day. I gotta let you know, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I'm with Red Cross instructor and trainer, Manny Perez. Manny, welcome. Now, we'll go into depth in some commonly asked questions, as well as providing a CPR demonstration. Now, I've known Manny for a couple years now, and anytime I have a question regarding CPR, or I have a reporter that may want to do an interview, whether it's in Tampa or Orlando, Manny is one of the first persons I go to when I need to ask a question or when I have an inquiry. So needless to say, Manny is one of my trusted colleagues here at the American Red Cross, and I know him pretty well. And I think it's fair that not only that the fact that I know him, that everyone else knows him as well. So Manny, again, thank you for being here, and kind of let everyone know basically how long you've been with the Red Cross and training service in particular, and just your bio, if you will.
Sure. Thanks so much for having us, Dwayne. My name's Manny Perez. I'm an instructor, trainer, educator is my title here in training services. And my function is to float around the country delivering instructor trainer level, instructor level, and participant level certifications in all the various disciplines of CPR and first aid that we offer. I've been with the organization as an external provider, as a volunteer here in the chapters, and full-time staff of the Red Cross since 1999. So rolling up on 25 years here delivering this content.
Right. So that is awesome. Now, give me a sense. The folks, you've been here for a while. The folks that signed up for this particular class, what do you find is the key motivation for folks signing up for CPR?
That's pretty often twofold. Often folks are registering for a CPR and first aid class to comply with workplace needs and compliance with different local and state regulations, and making sure folks on staff at their business are ready to deal with emergencies. So they come to us for training in that way. But just as often, people are registering just out of a sense of personal duty or concern, and feeling they can respond, whether it's in their home or larger community, to these kinds of emergencies.
Right. So no matter what your motivation for signing up, whether it be for work or you simply just want to have the knowledge, the fact is that every second counts in this life-threatening situation, in any life-threatening situation. That's why it's so important to be prepared and feel empowered to basically rescue or respond in a critical moment when it happens. But this live session will contain 3 parts. So first of all, we will provide an overview of the classroom setting. And Kathy, if you can pan to your left a little bit there, and so we can get a shot of the mannequins to give everyone kind of a visual of what folks will be looking at during the second portion of our live session, which is the skills portion. So you know what to expect when you're in a classroom learning CPR. And the last portion will be the question and answer portion. And remember, Kathy Burkett is our eyes here, so she'll probably read out the questions, or I may read out the questions. Put those questions in the chat box, and Manny will answer your questions in that portion of the live session. So, Manny, let's get down to business. First, let's start with kind of the classroom setting. Sure. And what people can expect. So, tell me, what's the difference between a blended learning class and a fully instructor-led class?
The significant difference between the two is the participant gets to manage their acquisition of the knowledge and the skills and the time that they invest. In an instructor-led class, more traditional format, after registering on redcross.org and then coming into the class, the instructor would guide the participants in that group through guided discussions and lecture, through skills sessions and practice with feedback, and then an assessment scenario eventually to achieve the certification. In the blended learning format, the participants would register ahead of time, but then be granted access to online content to cover the cognitive portion of the class and learn the underlying concepts. They would then meet the instructor at the prearranged time and do an abbreviated skills session. So at the end of the process, the certification resulting would be effectively the same, but the student gets to manage how they get that information. In the blended learning format, certainly they can start and stop and go attend to other activities, but the system would save their progress and they'd be able to jump back in and manage their time as they see fit and their requirements dictate.
Right. And I know comfortability is a factor when attending one of these classes. Like, for instance, I'm wearing a long sleeve shirt right now. Is this appropriate, or kind of talk about what's appropriate in coming into the class and what to wear?
You look great, but we don't need to come in our Sunday best necessarily. We do need to come comfortably dressed. So business casual is kind of the order of the day in that regard, something that the participant feels comfortable in terms of managing their temperature, but also facilitating movement around the classroom and performing skills and participating in the larger discussions.
And how long does this class usually take?
For the blended learning course, we can expect to invest about 2 hours or so in doing that online content, and then coming into the skills session for a blended learning would be about an hour and a half or so for the adult and pediatric CPR, AED, and first aid. In the instructor-led, we could be here for around 2 hours up to 3 hours, 45 minutes or so for the traditional instructor-led in the adult and pediatric first aid, CPR, and AED outline.
Right. And I know Kathy panned to the actual mannequins. Kind of give me a sense of what, obviously the mannequins are there, but what else will be used in the classroom setting?
After our mannequins are used to practice the skills and simulate the delivery of care. Also, we have our AED trainers simulating devices that recreate the experience of using an AED. We have pads that adhere to the mannequins to simulate that delivery of care. Participants would be provided as they enter into the classroom a student training kit with non-latex disposable gloves, a flexible face shield breathing barrier, and some bandaging material that they use to practice all the skills. Also on the tables today, we've got the limb trainers we use for the first aid component too.
Right. And you just mentioned a few things where sanitation, I'm sorry, you want to make sure that everything's clean.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when the instructor's coming in and setting up their materials, we're going to make sure that those are clean and ready to go. There's a clean lung in at the beginning of the class, a clean face on each of the mannequins, so the participants can feel comfortable coming into the classroom and participating in a realistic way that's also safe. And we'll use those breathing barriers during the practices for that aspect of care. We use non-latex disposable gloves throughout the care, and we learn to take those off properly. And then after the class, the instructor is breaking that mannequin down and setting it up for the next experience.
Right. So obviously, things are sanitized pretty well. Awesome.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So how many students are typically in a class? Because, sometimes you want to make sure that you have some one-on-one with some of your students too, right?
Sure. The instructor is always going to devote their attention to each individual participant when they come into the class. But we also, in terms of our training design, utilize a peer-to-peer reciprocal practicing model where the students are interacting with each other and the instructor is managing the whole experience for the larger group. So for those reasons, we limit our class sizes and our community offerings to 12 participants to ensure that everybody gets the necessary attention, the necessary support, but they're also interacting with a group of people with different perspectives and the opportunity to hear things in different voices and different ideas as well.
Right. Now, with all that being said, I think we can find out what high quality CPR looks like. So this moves on. We can move on to our skill session at this point. Sure. So Manny, we can go over there and move on to the mannequins.
Let's take a look here. Our brain mannequins here, the big reds, are going to simulate the delivery of care and give some feedback as the participant interacts with them. Simulating what I do throughout the whole response. Any first aid responder would enter the scene checking for safety as a preliminary concern to make sure it's okay for us to be there. If the scene's safe and we determine there's a need to give care, we pull out our personal protective equipment, PPE, like gloves and a breathing barrier, and that would enable us to deliver care in an effective way. We'd be forming an initial impression as we approach the person to determine what life-threatening conditions are present and what care needs to be delivered. If the person appears unresponsive, I shout in a loud voice, "Are you okay?" If the person's unresponsive to a verbal prompt, I approach closer with gloves on and tap on the shoulder, shouting again, "Are you okay?" If the person's unresponsive to that shout, tap and shout, I'd indicate to a bystander to call more advanced personnel to get an AED and first aid kit and come back to the scene when they're done. In that assessment, no more than 10 seconds. If I don't see that the person's responsive or breathing, I begin CPR right away, and our mannequins are going to facilitate that practice and enable us to see what modifications need to be made. If I determine the person's not conscious and not breathing, I place my hands on the chest, position my shoulders over my hands so I can use body weight, and compress the chest at least 2 inches at a rate of 100 to 120 compressions for a cycle of 30 compressions. Something like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 and 11 and 12 and 13, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30. After 30 compressions are delivered, I use my breathing barrier to get 2 slow breaths. And then after that, resume another cycle of 30 compressions, repeating cycles of 30 and 2 until another responder arrives and takes over, the scene becomes unsafe, I'm too fatigued to continue, or the AED arrives and is ready to use. We're going to simulate that here with our AED trainer. Turning the device on, it would deliver voice prompts instructing me what care to deliver. While the AED's talking, I'd expose the person's chest, drying off the skin, and then as directed, place the pads on the body. 1 pad on the upper right, 1 pad on the lower left side. And when both pads are on the body, I can then plug in the connector and allow the AED to analyze, determining the necessity of care and deliver a shock when prompted to do so. When I deliver a shock, or if no shock is advised, I'd resume cycles of 30 and 2, again, very much as I demonstrated, and every 2 minutes the AED would analyze again, determining the need for care. And I would continue until help arrives. So that's the start to finish approach and the complete delivery of care. Let's give Dwayne here a chance, and I'm coaching as I would in the class in that coach bystander role as a participant, managed by the instructor. From Kathy's perspective, we would ensure the person's on their back in a firm, flat surface. Right. Kneel beside the person. Your knees should be about shoulder width apart near the person's body. We'll place the heel 1 hand on the center of the chest, the other hand on top, fingers interlaced. Position your shoulders so they're over your hands. We're going to lean forward even further, and then compress the chest at least 2 inches. Push hard and fast. Every time that forward's lighting up, we're doing great. Excellent. Allow the chest to return to its normal position. Full compression, full recoil. Excellent work. And then we move on. So within that context, the coach would direct their partner through, the instructor would manage the rotation of those roles. Everybody's, if you were the first aid responder, you're now going to coach your partner through these steps, read each step aloud and offer feedback. And that would allow the instructor to manage the larger group and insert feedback, allowing the participants to learn from one another and improve their performance. And then from chest compressions like we just had Dwayne demonstrate, the instructor would rotate into giving breaths with a face shield, into giving cycles of CPR, into using an AED, and culminating in adult CPR with an assessment scenario. And the instructor would prompt the group with cues as to what's happening in that emergency and allow the first aid responders to exhibit some decision making and build their confidence they can do it without someone standing over their shoulder.
Now, obviously, confidence is a huge factor when doing this, right?
Absolutely. So by practicing in a moderated environment, in a supportive environment like this, with supplementary materials that define the appropriate delivery of care, we can repeat in a less stressful environment the way that we should deliver care when it really happens.
Right. Manny, I mean, that was a great demonstration. I think some of the folks that are logged on may have a few questions, but let me ask you, right, we can sit right back down, but let me ask you too, cardiac arrest. How do you know when someone's in cardiac arrest? I mean, it's hard for people to tell, right?
Sure, absolutely. It's a little tricky. Other life-threatening conditions may be a little bit difficult to differentiate, but in our discussions in this class for the standard first aid CPR and AED course, if a person is unresponsive and not breathing or only gasping, that would be an indicator that their body's not functioning properly, and we would, after calling 911 and requesting an AED, begin CPR right away.
Now,
Okay, guys.
we have a question.
We have a couple of questions. First one is, what can you do with the CPR certification?
What can you do with the CPR certification? We can satisfy workplace requirements. We can start schooling in different disciplines and prepare ourselves to interact with a larger community and be safer in those work and home and community environments.
Okay, and our second question is, how do I know which class format is right for me?
If we go to redcross.org on our Take a Class page, we have a really good set of descriptions there of each class. We have some online learning where the informational content is presented, and we could get some background on what constitutes care for what kinds of conditions. The blended learning might be a little bit more effective if you have a bit of a busier schedule and you can start and stop that cognitive portion. And then when it comes time to take that hands-on skills session, the skill session's then shorter because that background knowledge has been achieved already. Other folks might feel a little bit more comfortable being led through the whole experience from start to finish, and the class format may be longer on the day. Some folks might feel a little bit more comfortable and build confidence through that discussion and comprehensive delivery of all that information.
Right, and Manny, right behind us, we have toddler mannequins, and we just performed the demonstration on the adult mannequins. What is the difference between performing CPR on, say, an adult as opposed to a toddler or a child?
We're going to make some modifications to the technique. Sequentially, care for the adult, child, or infant would be effectively the same in the delivery of compressions and breaths in cycles of 30 and 2. What would change is how we compress the chest for a child, a person before the onset of puberty. We compress about 2 inches, allowing the chest to fully recoil, where we compress at least 2 inches on the adult. We did a full head tilt to give the 2 breaths. On the adult, we'd go slightly past the neutral position for a child. So then further on the infant, a person under the age of 1, we'd use an encircling thumbs technique to deliver compressions to a depth of 1.5 inches, allowing full recoil. And then we would give breaths into the nostrils and the mouth at the same time, and only tilting the head to just about a neutral position. Always using a breathing barrier is one of the directions we give in the class too.
Right. Now, I know there are a few folks that have taken this class. Mm-hmm. Now, one of their main questions, and I hear this every so often, how often should I refresh my CPR knowledge? I think that's a question that folks often ask when they take this class.
Absolutely. One of the more significant concerns is the knowledge going to be useful for a severe time. So what we've arrived at through the time that the Red Cross has been delivering training is that we've arrived on a 2-year certification period. So retraining on a 2-year interval seems to be the most effective approach. There can be some concerns in the interim before your certification comes due. So one of the things that we have after the class is our first aid app. If you go to Google Play or to the Apple App Store, you can download for free an application that helps us recall our training that we've achieved in the class in a real simple, quick reference format. There's a hospital finder function there, and we can locate emergency rooms. As we scroll through the care steps, there's an option in life-threatening emergencies for us to call 911 from the app. And then the app also has some information about some FAQs to help us recall our training, some informational and social media connectivity, and then we can connect to redcross.org through the app and sign up for another set of training.
Now, here's a question that I personally have. It's tough to see someone who actually needs this life training procedure. How do I prepare myself mentally and emotionally to perform CPR in real life? Because doing it here and doing it in real life,
Sure.
obviously two different things.
That's a very valid concern that any participant might experience. By taking the initiative to get training and to get some of those supplementary materials, like our participant manual, we can fill in some of that background knowledge and expand our understanding and understand how these conditions arise, and then be prepared when those emergencies arise to actually step up and deliver care. And then using the First Aid app as a way to refresh our memories as to what proper care consists of, we'll be able to step forth when the moment arrives.
And one thing I'm interested in, I mean, normally there are kids that are young may want to possibly take this course.
Sure.
What is the age requirement for this particular course?
Actually, in our standard first aid, CPR, and AED courses, we don't have an age requirement. We simply want to ensure that the participant can perform CPR. Everybody participates. Everybody experiences some learning. So if a person is physically capable of doing chest compressions and giving the breaths, they can attend the CPR class and be certified when they achieve those requirements.
While we're waiting on a couple other questions, I mentioned earlier that we've had quite a few folks within this region, our 19-county region, who have received one of our Red Cross Life-Saving Awards. I mean, you've seen the stories, obviously. You've been into some of we've handed out
The certificate.
yeah, the certificates.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, I mean, in your opinion, how essential is it for folks to know this type of life training skill?
Absolutely, it's absolutely important that we be able to step up in those situations, and by participating in these trainings, that's the foundation for that. And we have some knowledge in our minds and some physical experience, some practice to know what constitutes effective care. I've delivered multiple certificates of merit to participants from classes and received recognition as an instructor who's delivered training to a recipient of these. Most recently, we had somebody in our Sarasota office where a young person, an elementary school age child, was able to save her parents' life through the delivery of some of the care that we talk about in those classes. So it can make a difference, and when we least expect it, when someone is able to utilize what they've seen in these demonstrations, what they've experienced in these practices, to feel like they can do the thing when someone's not standing around and coaching them through.
Right. Any other questions? No questions? Well, I know this course, obviously online, folks are able to take it online, but they have to be in person. They have to take it in person
Sure.
as well, right?
We have some really great informational content in our online-only training, and everybody's welcome to access that training by going to redcross.org/take-a-class, and there's a wealth of information there. Consider, on the other hand, some workplaces, some organizations may require you to participate in training that includes a hands-on component, and through our blended learning classes, through our instructor-led classes, that's what we offer, and those classes would result in certification that the participant could present then to that larger group of people that need to see their background and knowledge.
Right. So if we don't have any other questions, before we close out, and we have time for maybe a few more questions if folks want to type it in the chat. Remember that to find a class near you, to go to redcross.org/take-a-class. You'll see that URL in the banner on your screen, and you can find a course that works for you and your schedule, just whether it's in person, remote, blended learning. So again, that is redcross.org/take-a-class. Any other questions? Well, Manny, thank you so much for being here. I mean, pretty informative. Great to always get into, trying to get into training and refresh myself, so to speak, in terms of CPR and learning this life training skill. I mean, it's really a pleasure.
You did great.
Thank you, Manny. I really appreciate it. Thanks everyone for joining today. I hope you had value or got a little bit of value in this session today. Have a great day, everyone.